In January of 1992, I was one of the people that was selected from many across Canada to participate in one of the 5 Shaping Canada Constitutional Forums that were sponsored by the then Progressive Conservative federal government. And I attended the conference in Calgary, which was charged with exploring alternatives for institutions, including the Senate. The 5 conferences were Federal Provincial Division of Powers, which was held in Halifax, the Senate, which was held in Calgary, the Economic Union, held in Montreal, the Distinct Society, Canada, the Canada Clause, and the Charter, which was in Toronto, and a concluding conference in Ontario. And I had actually wanted to attend one of the other ones, but now, many years later, I'm actually very grateful that I was able to attend the one on the Senate, because I think more than anything it has continued to stay alive. So when I looked at, gone back and looked at some of the proposals that we were examining at the time, and one of the examples in front of me in an article written by David Elkins, from a magazine called The Network, which was a newsletter of the Network on the Constitution. It talks about Australia having a Triple E Senate that was elected, equal and effective, and had been since the country's official creation in 1901. And what experiences could we draw from that? But the method of electing the senators was incredibly important. And what was put before us was that the first-past-the-post system used for a senatorial election is not effective. It needs to, all it does actually is entrench a particular kind of partisanship, and it very much affects the kinds of interests that get represented, and that ultimately affects the functioning of the Senate. So the single transferable vote was the preferred method there. What's written in here is the moral is if you favor quick, decisive action by government, then abolish the Senate. But if you value compromise enough to endure the conflicts between the House and the Senate, which this new legitimacy will bring, then reform the Senate, partly by making it elected. When we look at what are the key elements of this, one of my frustrations with this government's approach toward the Senate is in choosing simply one piece of Senate reform. It in fact entrenches a whole series of things that are really quite unpalatable and which I find surprising that the government would be supportive of, but in fact it entrenches these very things by simply taking the system that it's in place and electing members over top of that. And what we need to look at is a whole package of things. And I spent 5 days in Calgary in 1992 looking at what this package needs to contain. And it needs to look particularly at the distribution of the number of Senate seats. It needs to look at the process to change, which is the constitutional amending formula. It needs to look at the equality of the Senate. What is the purpose of the Senate seats? We have members of Parliament who are elected on a geographic basis to represent the interests of the people that live in a geographic boundary. The idea of the Senate seats were always meant to work with a much larger constituency or issue base or interest based. And originally it started out with a sort of regional flavor to it. But if we are going to reform the Senate, it brought into play a number of other more modern concepts that were open for us. So when I look at Bill 55, the government's bill to open up their Senate bill again, and really all it's doing is extending the date so that they don't have to deal with this right now. I'm disappointed because I've always seen Senate reform as a huge opportunity that is not being, for which there is no uptake right now. And that's disappointing because there's lots of possibilities that we could work with in Canada to help refresh our democracy and to possibly do some pretty interesting things. So the current amending formula that was being worked with at that time, it's actually still in place, was unanimous consent for the provisions referred to in Section 41, the consent of Parliament for certain provisions relating to the national government, consent of the provincial legislature for those provisions relating to the provinces, and consent of Parliament in the provinces relating to provisions applicable to more than one province, etc., etc. But it also, and the Meech Lake Accord would have made two changes. The unanimous support of Parliament and the legislative assemblies of all the provinces would have been required for amendment of a number of additional matters, such as Senate reform and the creation of new provinces, which currently require the consent of Parliament and 2/3 of the legislative assemblies for amendment. And compensation would have been provided to a province opting out of any amendment transferring provincial legislative power to the Parliament. So none of this is simple stuff. It all requires a fair amount of hard work. So what were the pieces that we were looking at? Well, number one was that the Senate should not replicate the patterns of representation that were already present in the House of Commons. Another point of real contention was whether the Senate would be allowed to deal with what's called money bills. And we deal with that issue in this Assembly because essentially a private member's bill, which covers anyone that's not in Executive Council, not a minister, we can't bring forward any private bill that has anything to do with money. Essentially the question was around the Senate, would a money bill category be immunized from Senate scrutiny? And really, when you look at it, money bills account for between 1/2 and 3/4 of the House of Commons business. So not allowing the Senate to consider money bills actually gave them not very much to be dealing with. So that was another big piece of what we were looking at. But to me, and those powers came into play in a number of ways. So we were looking at Senate powers regarding normal legislation, regarding money bills, on ratifying appointments, on constitutional amendments, on the role of language and culture legislation. Could the Senate introduce money bills, never mind from commenting on them, but actually introduce a money bill? And could the Senate defeat the government? So those were the issues that we were contemplating. But where it really started to come home to me was when we looked at what would be entrenched. So when I hear the talk about a Triple E Senate, which was very big at the time, what really frustrated me was I looked at where we were and I thought, boy, if this is all we do is entrench an unfairness to my province. Why on earth would we willingly do that? And here's the distribution that we have. PEI has 4 Senate seats. Newfoundland has 6. New Brunswick has 10. Nova Scotia has 10. Saskatchewan has 6. Manitoba has 6. Alberta has 6. BC has 6. Quebec has 24, and Ontario has 24. So if we just went with what's in front of us with the government's proposal for electing senators, we're forever entrenched with 6 senators. Why on earth would we do that to ourselves? So a big piece of senatorial reform, which is the larger picture, is trying to figure out what should be the distribution of seats. And we spent a long time on this. We looked at all kinds of possible distributions. And the elected and effective, the Triple E Senate that you hear people talk about, would have basically assigned 10 seats to every single